If Mega Absol is a deck you care about, then this is what it looks like after rotation. In this video, I'm breaking down the Mega Absol post-rotation deck lists, talking about what cards rotated out, what cards replaced them, and how the deck actually wins games in the new format. So without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Pokemon players? Today we will talk about the post-rotation Mega Absol. So most of you know Mega Absol is losing the Turbo Energize, and that is one big part that helps this deck actually perform. But there are two ways this deck can actually work post-rotation, and we're going to talk about those possibilities today. So for those of you who don't know what Mega Absol is and does, Mega Absol is a basic Mega Pokemon with 280 HP with 2 attacks. The first one being the terminal period for 1 darkness energy and 1 colorless. It states, if your opponent's active Pokemon has exactly 6 damage counters on it, that Pokemon is knocked out, which is basically insane because this Pokemon lets us knock out anything in the standard format. But getting those 6 damage counters on it is the tricky part, but we're going to go over that in just a minute. The second attack for 2 darkness energy and 1 colorless is the Claw of Darkness. It does 200 damage to the opponent's active Pokemon, but your opponent reveals their hand and you get to discard a card you find there. So Claw of Darkness is going to be very disruptive as well against decks that have to set up for future turns, and getting to get rid of a card that they need to be able to set up or to close out the game is very good. So one way we can get those damage counters onto the opponent's Pokemon to be able to use the terminal period is Munkidori. Munkidori was always a way to place over damage counters from our board state to another's Pokemon. But then you might ask, like, hold up Onesie, how are you going to damage your own Pokemon to be able to fling over that damage to the opponent to be able to knock it out? So through the means of the Sinister Surge ability, which states once during your turn, you may use this ability, you may search your deck for a basic Dark Energy card and attach it to one of your benched Dark Pokemon. And if you attach an energy to any Pokemon in this way, you can place 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So through the means of the Toxtricity's ability, we can ramp up the damage onto our side of the board state to be able to fling over with Munkidori to be able to get those one-hit knockouts with a Mega Absol. But that is not all this deck has to offer, because through the means of the Peturant, we can also accelerate the Mega Absol into the active spot and poison it at the same time. So Subjugating Change states once during your turn, you may switch one of your benched Dark Pokemon except any Peturant with the active Pokemon. And if you do, the new active Pokemon is now poisoned. So that is going to be good for 2 main reasons. 1, Toxtricity will allow you to accelerate energies from your deck to one of your benched Pokemon, being the Mega Absol in fact, and then through the means of the Peturant EX, you can promote your benched Pokemon instantly in the active spot while also poisoning it, placing 1 damage counter onto that Pokemon every single Pokemon checkup. So through the means of that, the damage can ramp up as well to be able to channel over with Munkidori turn after turn. So because we're poisoning ourselves, we are ramping up the damage which we can use to channel over back to the opponents. So that's why this deck doesn't include any air balloon or switching options, because we have access to that Peturant EX. And knowing that, this deck relies on a lot of resources, so that's why there's 2 copies of the Mega Kangaskhan EX. So Mega Kangaskhan has this run errant ability. When it's in the active spot, you may draw 2 cards, which is going to be very good to be able to draw a lot of resources to use in this deck. And also knowing we need to fill up our bench with the Toxel, as well as the Kangaskhan, as well as the Absol, we need some room to be able to do that. And that's why there's also the inclusion of the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX in combination with the Area Zero, will allow us to place 8 Pokemon onto the bench, being Toxel, 1 Cornerstone, 1 Kangaskhan, 1 Absol, double Munkidori, the Peturant, and then there's room for other stuff. And then this Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon is also going to be good because of this Cornerstone stance, because that ability states prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability, which is going to be very good. We can utilize the Area Zero Underdepths, and through the means of its ability Cornerstone stance, the opponent's Pokemon with an ability can't hit through it, so we can keep having our full bench while our only Terra Pokemon can't get knocked out by the opponent's Pokemon that have abilities. And also an interesting combination, I think, is the inclusion of the Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking. Because if you use Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking in combination with Mega Kangaskhan Run Errand, you can always place 2 cards on top of your deck which you need to be able to set up your board state. It might as well be the Unfast Stamp, the Pokepad to search out your Toxtricity, or perhaps you need to accelerate energies from your discard pile back into your deck. Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking is a very cool tech card to be able to set up your board state turn after turn, as well as just fetching out what you really need in that matchup to either close out the game or to disrupt them entirely. And then we have the inclusion of the Yveltal. So I'm a big fan of the Yveltal because with the rotation of Professor Tura's scenario, there's not a lot of switch outs happening post-rotation. So this clutch Yveltal will help you gain time to set up your board state to accelerate energies to other Pokemon through the means of the Toxtricity or accelerating by hand because of this clutch attack. So clutch states during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. And if you use Boss's Orders to gust something up that can't attack and then can't retreat through the means of the Yveltal lock, that is going to be really good because that will buy you the time to set up your board state. And if you fail to fetch out the Boss's Orders, there is also the 1 copy of the Meowth EX. So this Meowth EX will allow you to get any supporter card from your deck depending on what you need in that current match. And then we get also the interesting addition to this deck. Because we're working with energy acceleration through the means of Toxtricity, we work with channeling over the damage with a Munkidori, so we might as well include this Yveltal EX. So this Yveltal EX has the Death Soul attack, which states knock out all of your opponent's Pokemon with 50 HP or less remaining. And that is going to be very, very good because you can generally ramp up the damage turn after turn, accelerating with Toxtricity, channeling over with Munkidori, and then just gradually building up the damage onto the opponent's side of the board until you can knock out all of their Pokemon with the Death Soul attack from Yveltal EX. And then you might be wondering, like, hold up, Onesie, when they evolve their Pokemon, it is normally going to have a lot more HP. How are we going to work with that? If you're going for an Yveltal play, you might as well play the Unfast Stamp to limit them from any resources while continuing to use Claw of Darkness to be able to disrupt the opponent from setting up entirely. Because knowing this is going to be a very disruptive type of the Mega Absol. Because Unfast Stamp states you can only use this card if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, and each player shuffles their hands into their deck. Then you may draw 5 cards, but your opponent only draws 2. And that is going to be very good in combination with the Claw of Darkness, because the Claw of Darkness gets to snipe a card from the opponent's hand, and you get to choose which one. And then if the Unfast Stamp wasn't enough, there's also the inclusion of the Judge, which shuffles your hand into your deck, and you may draw 4 cards, which is going to be good for 2 things. 1, if you're holding up to a lot of dark energies, you can't accelerate them with Toxtricity because they have to come from your deck. You can always use a Judge on top of that to shuffle those energies back into your deck, and then hopefully not drawing into them, so you can accelerate them again through the means of the Toxtricity. And then if your opponent is holding onto a lot of cards, we can use the Xerosic's Machinations, because this will allow us to trim the opponent's hand to only 3 cards. And then if we use the Claw of Darkness on top of it, obviously the opponent is going to keep those 3 main cards as the best cards they have, but then Claw of Darkness will be able to snipe 1 card out of their hand as well. And also one interesting addition to this deck is the double copy of Energy Switch. Because Toxtricity only allow us to accelerate energies to bench dark Pokemon, with the combination of Energy Switch, we can accelerate those energies onto the Munkidori, and perhaps our attachment for turn as well. So with that combo, we can get a double Munkidori off in a single turn, which is just insane. And we can always achieve that through the means of the Cypher Maniac grabbing out Energy Switch, perhaps the Pokepads to grab out the Toxtricity, and then Mega Kangaskhan will be able to draw those 2 cards. And then Pachorans EX can just promote that Pokemon we want to attack with, being the Yveltal or the Mega Absol EX, and we can work from from there. So I think Mega Absol post-rotation will still pack a very hard punch. And I wonder what you guys will think of it, so let me know down in the comments and we'll get back with the second version. Alright, and we're back with the second version, and you can already tell this deck doesn't have the Toxtricity. It is completely different. It works with only basic Pokemon, so that's why I chose to cut a Pachorant and add 2 copies of Latias, because we're working with only basic Pokemon, and you can always have that free retreat through the means of the Skyliner ability. Without having Toxtricity in play, there has to be another way to accelerate those dark energies to our Pokemon. That's why the Mega Ardino comes into play. So through the means of the Kaleidovalt's attack, you may flip 3 coins, and for each heads, you may accelerate 2 basic energy cards from your deck to any of your Pokemon in any way you like. So that is going to be exceptionally well, and knowing this is going to be a going second deck as well, because Kaleidovaltz is an attack you can only use on your first turn going second. But obviously, that means we need to get this Mega Ardino into the active spot and having an energy as an attachment to be able to use this attack. How can we pull this off? Well, there is 4 copies of Serrano to be able to pull this off, because Serrano states, search your deck for 3 Pokemon EX, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So through the means of the Serrano, we can already grab a Kangaskhan, an Audino, and the Latias to be able to get that combination off. So that's why, of course, you have to be lucky to be able to have Serrano in hand, but if you manage to start with an Ultra Ball, you can already use the Ultra Ball to get a turn 1 Meowth off to grab out your Serrano, which helps you accelerate your board state and search out the Pokemon you need to pull off your attack. But then obviously, this Mega Audino is not good for anything else, so that's going to be a liability in future turns. So that's why there's an inclusion of the Scoop Up Cyclone to be able to scoop up your Mega Audino back into your hands, so the opponent can't just easily knock it out for 3 prize cards. But then again, what's different of this version, because we don't need to have a wide bench like the one we need with the Toxtricity, because we utilize the Mega Audino, might as well play the Lively Stadium, because through the means of the Lively Stadium, all basic Pokemon will get plus 30 HP. And that's going to be big, because we're an all basic deck, and having plus 30 HP will help our Pokemon be more tanky. But unlike the other lists of the Mega Absol, we can't just place damage counters onto ourselves, so we have to rely the opponent just hitting into us to be able to channel over with Munkidori. So getting those 6 damage counters onto the opponent's Pokemon will be very tricky this time. But that's why we also have another attacker to use situationally, and that is going to be the Lily's Clefairy, because through the means of this Full Moon Rondo, as well as the Fairy Zone ability, we get to hit into those nasty Dragon Pokemon, because those will be very hard to deal with. And also a cool thing to be able to accelerate both energy onto that Lily's Clefairy is going to be the inclusion of the Crispin, because Crispin will allow us to fetch out 2 energies from our deck, accelerate 1 through the means of Crispin, and then you can accelerate 1 from your hands. And that's going to be exceptionally good, because we also have copies of Energy Switch. So after a successful Kaleidovaltz, we can also use the Energy Switch to be able to switch those energies off to the attackers we need in that matchup and at that given time. And in this deck, there's also the inclusion of the Team Rocket's Petrol. So I think this is a very cool one-off to have in this deck, because this will allow you to search out any trainer cards from your deck. So that might just be another supporter card for next turn, it might just be an item card you need in this turn, or it might just be the stadium which you need to ramp up the health of your Pokemon. So that is going to be it for the post-rotation Mega Absol, and I wonder what you guys think of it, so do let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear all about it. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to like and subscribe, as well as letting me know down in the comments what you think of this post-rotation Mega Absol deck list. And if you want to stick around for a little bit longer, I've got more deck profiles, gameplay videos, and learn to play all on this channel. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.